I was pulling a trailer with a 15-passenger van that was full of high school seniors. We were making our way back from the Outer Banks of North Carolina up to western Michigan, where I was the youth pastor, and we had kind of just left the Washington, D.C. area, and we're heading across the kind of the skinny part of Maryland over to Morgantown, West Virginia, which is where we were going to stay that night. And as we were driving along, I noticed that our gas was starting to get low, but I knew we still had some places to stop, and so we went through Hagerstown, Maryland, and we went through Cumberland, Maryland, and as we were getting a little bit past Cumberland, I thought, well, maybe I should stop. But here's the thing, when you're driving a big van with a trailer behind you, some gas stations you really can't get in and out of, and especially when you're up in these kind of mountain towns, there's like the exit ramp's kind of tough to get around, and there's not a lot of turnaround space, and I wasn't real confident about my ability, and so I thought, I'm going to look for a place where I can get off that's going to be nice and safe. And so as we got to the last exit in Cumberland, I said, this doesn't look like a good exit, so we'll keep going, and we'll find another exit. So we kept going, and going, and going, and it was night, and it was dark. And I said, hey, Marianne, can you reach into the glove box there and pull out a map? Now, this was a long time ago, right? This was back in the day when if you had a cell phone, the only thing it did was actually make phone calls. So it didn't tell you what to do with your life. So we actually had to use paper maps. Some of you remember this. And I said, can you look at the map and just tell me where's the next city? And so she's looking, and I'm driving, and there's not much coming from her side of the van, and I said, hey, hon, did you find a city? She's like, I don't see any coming. We're not going to see one for a while. And now, if you've ever been on this stretch of I-68 in Maryland, it kind of does this thing, right? So you're just going up and down through these mountains. And so I'm starting to get a little bit nervous because that gas needle is starting to get onto the E. And I'm thinking, oh, boy. And so, you want to keep a brave face on because you got all the kids in the back, and you don't want them to have this idea, we're going to get stuck and stranded on the side of the road in hillbilly country, and people with axes are going to come after us, and if it's not them, it's going to be the wolves. We're all going to die here because David didn't get gas. But then that gas gauge kept going, and I was starting to get nervous, and I thought, I need to start conserving gas. So I decided what I'm going to do is as we go up and down through these mountains, when we get to the top of each one, I'm just going to pop the van in neutral. And we're just going to roll. And I'm not going to hit the brakes because the idea here is we hit the bottom and then we just coast back up as far as we can. And so I want us to get to the bottom of the mountain going as fast as possible so we can go back up. And so we're going down and we're just starting to fly. The van's starting to shake and the kids are screaming, like, I got this, guys, don't worry. And we get to the bottom and we coast back up as far as we could, and then just as little gas as possible to just kind of creep back up the mountain to the top, and then back down we go. All the way. Now here's the thing. I don't know anything about cars, right? I have no idea if what I did was actually saving gas or maybe making it worse. I don't know. But the thing is, I was desperate. And sometimes when you're desperate, you do desperate things. Have you ever been there? Desperate people have a tendency to do desperate things. There's a story in John chapter 4 about a father who is desperate. Now, if you're a parent, you understand this, right? That when your kids are not well, nothing's well. And if you're a parent, you understand you would do absolutely anything and everything for a child who's not okay. And here we have a story in John chapter 4 of a dad whose son is not okay. And he's desperate. And he's willing to do anything and everything for his son to get well. So if you have your Bible, open it to John chapter 4, and we're going to get started in verse 46. All right? So he came again to Cana, that's Jesus, in Galilee, where he had made the water wine. And at Capernaum, there was an official whose son was ill. Now, actually, in this story, geography really matters. So we're going to take a minute, and I'm going to describe these places to you. So Jesus is in a town called Cana, and the official is in a town called Capernaum. Imagine Israel, okay? And Israel is kind of bordered on the west by the Mediterranean Sea, and it's bordered on the east by the Sea of Galilee in the north and the Dead Sea in the south, and they're connected by the Jordan River. All right, a lot of Jesus' life was spent up in the north around the Sea of Galilee. That's why sometimes he was called a Galilean. Now, Cana is not on the Sea of Galilee. It's actually between the Sea of Galilee and the Mediterranean Sea. It's up in the hills a little bit ways, about 16 miles from the Sea of Galilee. Capernaum is right on the Sea of Galilee. It's on the north shore of the Sea of Galilee. So that's where the official is. He's in Capernaum on the north shore of the Sea of Galilee. Jesus is about 16 miles away in Cana. And you're going to see in just a minute why this is important. When this man heard that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, he went to him and asked him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. So this guy's son is at the point of death. He's sick and he's probably dying. And like we said, a dad will do anything for his child who's at the point of death. And so he gets up in the morning. Probably his son's had a rough night, and he realizes this is it if we don't do something. And he's heard this rumor about this guy Jesus. And the story is that Jesus is in Cana, and so this guy says, I'm going to Cana. But this isn't just a walk around the block, is it? It's not just going across the street. It's not even going to the next town. Jesus is 16 miles away. Now, some of you guys are the runners, right? You probably got a 16.0 sticker on your car because you've run from Capernaum to Cana. But most of us can't do that. And remember, this is uphill most of the way. And so what we're actually talking about here is probably a 6 to 8 hour journey that this man has to take. And I'm guessing, because his son is sick, it's closer to 6 than 8. And so he sets off from Capernaum to Cana to go find Jesus. Probably early in the morning he leaves, and he arrives around 1 o'clock. We'll see that later in the story. He says, Jesus, can you please come down with me to Capernaum? My son is sick, and he's dying. So Jesus said to him, unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. Now, how does this feel when you first read this? It's like, why is Jesus so mean? What is Jesus saying to this guy? What is he doing? This guy's son is dying, and Jesus almost blows him off. Just says, unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. So what's Jesus getting at here? Well, understand, the you here is actually plural. So Jesus is not just talking to this guy, but he's actually using this opportunity to talk to the crowd that had gathered around him. Remember, everywhere Jesus goes, there's a crowd there. And so Jesus is talking to this whole crowd, and what he's really saying to them is, you all need to think about what it is you're looking for here. Because right now, Jesus is kind of like a curiosity. He's this guy that does cool tricks. He's almost like a celebrity, and everybody wants to follow the celebrity. Everybody wants to be close to the celebrity. And Jesus is kind of just picking at them a little bit and saying, hey, you need to think about what you're really looking for here. Are you here just because you're looking for a magic trick? Or do you want to discover what's really going on? Because what Jesus wanted them to understand was that behind the tricks, behind the miracles, behind the amazing signs and wonders, there was a person. And Jesus wanted them to believe not in the signs, but in the Savior. Now, this man's not deterred by what Jesus says. So the official said to him, Sir, come down before my child dies. And Jesus said to him, Go, your son will live. The man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him and went on his way. And as he was going down, his servants met him and told him that his son was recovering. So he asked them the hour when he began to get better, and they said to him, Yesterday, at the 7th hour, the fever left him. And the father knew that was the hour when Jesus had said to him, Your son will live. Now this is awesome. there's something here that gets lost really easily, but I don't want you to miss it. So the man talks to Jesus, and Jesus says, go, your son will live. And so John says, so the man leaves, right? And there's only one sentence here. He leaves, and then he's talking to the servants. So when he gets home, the servants come running out and say, hey, good news, your son's alive, he's getting better. And the man says, great, when did this happen? And they say, yesterday. So here's what that means. It means this guy didn't make it back to Capernaum. You see, he left the morning before, went from Capernaum to Cana to see Jesus, but it's a long trek. He has his interaction with Jesus, but by the time he leaves Cana to go back to Capernaum, he can't make it all the way home. And in those days, you cannot travel at night. Because if you travel at night, you're likely to get robbed, beaten, likely killed. And so somewhere between Cana and Capernaum, this guy has to stop and spend the night. So now think about what's going on for him. He has no way of knowing if his son is alive or dead. Do you think he slept that night? I know I wouldn't. Do you think he tossed and turned all night, paced the floor, wondering, is my son alive? Will I ever see him again? Did I do the wrong thing? Should I just have stayed home and been with him in this time? He has no idea. And I think his story is our story. You see, all of us, we start out our life going to find Jesus. We're seeking for Jesus. And the first part of our life is spent looking for him. And then there comes that moment in time when you finally meet Jesus. And you say, Jesus, this is what I need. And Jesus says, you know what? I'm going to take care of you. I've got this. He makes us a promise. But then sometimes between the promise of Jesus and the fulfillment of that promise, there's a long, dark night. Sometimes that night lasts a night. Sometimes it lasts a week or a month or a year or years. And in one sense, we're all still in it because we've not seen Jesus' promises fulfilled completely. But do you see how the story ends? The story ends with a fulfilled promise. And that's how our story ends too. So if today you're here and you're kind of in that dark night, right? I know what Jesus has promised me. I know what Jesus has said he will do. But right now, I don't know if it's going to happen. Right now, I don't know what's going to happen. And I'm pacing the floor and I'm restless and I can't sleep because I don't know what's going on. I'm in the dark night. Do you see that Jesus always comes through? All right? And so the man gets home and the servants say he was healed at the 7th hour. And the father knew that was the hour when Jesus had said to him, your son will live. The 7th hour is 1 o'clock, by the way. And he himself believed in all his household. And this was now the second sign that Jesus did when he had come from Judea to Galilee. So the first sign was the water to wine, and this is the second sign. You know, we like to use the word miracle. John always uses the word sign. John has some key words in his book, words like sign and see and believe, because what John wants is for us to see the signs of Jesus, and he wants that to lead us to belief. But what's interesting is in the next couple chapters of the book of John, there are some more signs. There's 2 more miracles that Jesus does in the next 2 chapters. One is that he heals a man who's been paralyzed, and he sits at this pool at a place called Bethesda, and he can't get into the pool, but Jesus comes and he heals him. And then in the next chapter, Jesus feeds the 5,000. We've heard that story. But what's really unique about John is he doesn't just tell us about the signs or the miracles. He shows us how people respond. And so here, this official, his son is healed. It's an amazing miracle, and it causes him to believe in Jesus. But the next sign that Jesus does, he heals the man at the pool. John doesn't show us how that follows up with the man. Instead, he shows us the reaction of the religious leaders. They see the miracle. They see the sign. And instead of leading them to believe, they get angry. And it leads them away from belief. They choose not to believe in Jesus. And then we see the feeding of the 5,000, and here again we have this huge, massive crowd of people who see the miracle. And it doesn't lead them to belief, it just leads to more curiosity. And they keep coming back to Jesus saying, show us more, feed us more. We kind of like this show. We want to see more of it. And here's what John is pointing out to us. John is showing us that people will see the same thing and believe something very different. People will look at Jesus and they will see who Jesus says he is, what Jesus can do. They'll see the miracles of Jesus and they will believe completely different things. This man believes that Jesus is the Son of God, and the religious leaders believe that Jesus is from Satan. And they're seeing the same signs. And so John wrote this book, the Gospel of John. He wrote it specifically so that people would see the miracles of Jesus, and that would lead them to believe that Jesus is the Son of God. Because if they believe that Jesus is the Son of God, they can have eternal life. I've shown you this verse before, and we'll probably keep coming back to it because it's kind of the core verse in the book of John. It's in chapter 20. He's almost to the end of the book, and this is what John writes. Now, Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples. By the way, you can read all about those in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, which are not written in this book. But these ones are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. You see, how you respond to the work of Jesus determines whether or not you have eternal life, whether or not you have abundant life. Here's the big idea of John's gospel, is that Jesus' signs point to something. And so the question then for us is, to what are they pointing you? You see, Jesus' signs mean something, and they're pointing us to something. So if we look at the book of John, and the middle part of the book is spent talking about what I would say Jesus' signs and Jesus' sayings. John tells us about the miracles of Jesus, his signs, but John also includes a lot of conversations. In fact, John includes many more conversations than Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And the reason is because Jesus would do these miracles, and then he would talk to the people about what they mean. Jesus was constantly trying to show the people, look, I'm doing these signs not to entertain you, but to convince you that you can have confidence that I'm the Son of God. And so Jesus shows these signs, and then he talks about what they mean. And so this week we're looking at the signs, and next week we'll look at the sayings. But if you look at all of John gives us 7 miracles, 7 signs. There was the water turned to wine. There was the official son that we just looked at. There's the man who was healed at the pool. There's the feeding of the 5,000. Jesus walks on water. He heals a blind man. And then the big sign, he raises Lazarus from the dead. And if we look at all of these signs of Jesus and we ask ourselves, what are these pointing to? We can see that Jesus' signs point us to Jesus' power, right? Because some of these things he does, we couldn't do them. We can't heal people who are sick with just a word from 16 miles away. We can't go to a man who's a paralytic and say, stand up and walk. We can't go to a blind man and say, you can see. And we certainly can't raise someone from the dead. You see, Jesus had power, not like any other human has power. And if we look at Jesus' power, we realize that Jesus is not just a mere person. He is sent from God. His signs point us to his power. His signs also point us to his provision. I think it's really cool that in the book of John, Jesus' first miracle is at a wedding, it's at a party, and he's turning water to wine. He's providing people at the party. He's taking their shame and turning it to celebration. Because Jesus wants to provide what we need. He feeds the 5,000. And the story opens with John letting us know that Jesus looked at this crowd and had compassion on them because they were hungry and they had nothing to eat. Jesus loves to provide. And so when we look at Jesus' miracles, and we see his provision, we have a picture of God's provision for us because God always provides everything we need. And Jesus' miracles point us to his provision. I think it's really cool that Jesus' miracles point us to his presence. This walking on the water miracle is really cool. So Jesus' disciples are out on the Sea of Galilee. And these are not just recreational boaters, right? Many of them are fishermen. This is their life. They understand how the water works. But somehow they get caught out on the lake, and there's a massive storm that comes in, and they are panicking. And all of a sudden they look out, and here comes Jesus walking across the water. That in and of itself is really cool. But what's really cool is that Jesus is walking on the water. Why? So that he can be with them in the storm. And when Jesus goes to raise Lazarus from the dead, he doesn't just walk in and say, okay, get up, Lazarus. He first spends time with Mary and Martha. And then before he raises Lazarus from the dead, we'll talk more about this later. Before he raises Lazarus from the dead, what does it say that he did? He cried. Because he wanted to sit there with them in their grief so that they would know that in their darkest hour, he was with them. You see, Jesus' miracles remind us that in our storms and in our darkest hours, he is there with us. Jesus' signs point to his presence. And so if you're alive while Jesus is walking the earth and you're seeing these amazing things that he does, you can't help but see his power and his provision and his presence. And all of that leads you to understand what Jesus' mission was. Because Jesus' mission was to relieve suffering, we see that in all of his miracles, and to rescue sinners. You see, that's the big one. Is Jesus' miracles remind us that he came to rescue sinners, to do for sinful people what they couldn't do for themselves. And we all fall into that category, right? Jesus came to rescue us from our sin. I want you to think about this for a second. Why are miracles even necessary? Why are miracles even necessary? The reason we need miracles is because our world is messed up. Why does a son get sick unto death? Why is a man born paralyzed? Or why is a man born blind? Or why does a brother in the prime of life die? Because our world is messed up. See, the reason we need miracles is because the world doesn't work the way it's supposed to work. Why doesn't the world work the way it's supposed to work? Because Adam and Eve disobeyed God. Because they brought evil into the world, and as evil spreads, it infects every single part of creation. And by the way, we don't really blame Adam and Eve because every single one of us would have done the same thing given the same opportunity, because we do the same thing every day. And when we choose to disobey God, we bring evil into the world. And that evil works its way into every corner of creation. And so the reason miracles are necessary is because the world is broken. And the reason the world is broken is because we broke it. So how do we fix it? Well, that would take a miracle. And you see, this is what Jesus' miracles point to more than anything else, is that Jesus has another miracle coming. It's the big one. He's going to fix everything. You see, when Jesus fixed this official's son, that was just a little taste of what he can do. He didn't heal everyone that was sick. And when Jesus healed the blind man, that was just a taste of what he can do. He didn't heal every blind man. And when Jesus fed the 5,000, that was just a taste of what he can do, because he didn't feed everybody. But the day is coming when Jesus is going to do the ultimate miracle. And he's going to fix everything. And he's going to restore everything. He promised this to his disciples in John 16. He's talking to them right before he goes to die. And this is what he says to them. He says, I have said these things to you that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have trouble. You have tribulation. But take heart, I have overcome the world. Let this sink in for a second. Jesus is saying to his disciples, this world doesn't work the way it's supposed to work. And in this world, you're going to have problems. There's going to be suffering. There's going to be tribulation. But take heart. Have confidence. Why? Because I have overcome the world. Jesus is saying, because I've got this, you can have confidence. So how can we have confidence for the future based on Jesus' work in the past? So let me take you back a couple years. I was in college. I was a junior. I loved intramural sports, and one of my favorite intramural sports was flag football. And I played on a pretty good team. We were called the Wounded Ducks. And we found ourselves my junior year in the championship game. It was a great game, back and forth, really evenly matched teams. Fourth quarter, we were behind by a touchdown, but we had the ball, and we're marching down the field. We found ourselves in a place where it was fourth down, and I don't remember how many yards we had to go, but this was it. We get the first down, we keep playing. Maybe we get a touchdown and tie the game. We don't get the first down, game's over, Wounded Ducks are dead ducks. So we're in the huddle. We're like, what are we going to do? And we decided to run a play. We were going to throw the ball to a guy on our team who hadn't caught a pass all day. Makes perfect sense, right? Well, it did to us, because we actually had a name for this play. It was called the Majeski. And it was named for a guy named Dave Majeski. Now, Dave's one of my lifelong friends. He's a huge guy, right? He's 6'4". He's probably around 200 pounds in college. And he had an incredible ability to catch the ball. In fact, he would almost catch everything you threw to him. He had really soft hands, loved to catch the ball, but hated to run. I mentioned he was a big guy. So on our team, he said, you know what, guys, I'm not going to go out for passes. I'm just going to be the center. So I'll snap the ball to the quarterback, and then I'll just hang out at the line of scrimmage until the next play. All right, that's cool, Dave. You can do that. But once every game, we would run the Majeski. And the way the Majeski worked is Dave would have the ball here, and the rest of us would all line up to his right. And we'd all line up there, and our quarterback, Jeff, would say whatever he'd say, hike, cut, whatever, give me the ball. Dave would snap the ball back to him, and all of us who were on the right would run across the field to the left. And Dave would just stand there like he always did. But as the defense kind of shifted across, they never paid attention to him because he never went out for a pass. But as the defense shifted across with all the receivers, he would just slowly start to drift off to the right. And he'd make sure nobody was going with him, and he'd take off down the field. And Jeff would kind of lob the ball up into the air, and every time Dave would catch it. It was a great play because even though he was 6'4", he was invisible to the defense, and they never saw it coming. And so here we are. We're in the huddle. This is the play of plays. The game is resting on this play. We have got to run the play we have the most confidence in, and we say, what are we going to run? We're going to run the play that has worked every other time we've run it. It's the Majeski. Let's run it. And that is exactly why I know you want to know what happened, don't you? Well, he caught it. We won the game. But see, our confidence in Jesus comes because of what he's done already. We've seen his miracles. We've seen his power. We've seen how he takes care of his people, and so that gives us great confidence for the future. You see, Jesus is still doing miracles today. We don't always notice, but we should. Remember, a couple weeks ago, we talked about Jesus turning water to wine. You know, Jesus turns water to wine all the time. We just don't think it's a miracle. Right now, all over the world, there are grapes that are growing, right? Well, who's providing the sun for those grapes? Who's providing the water for those grapes? Who puts the nutrients in the soil for those grapes? You see, that's God doing a miracle. Remember yesterday when it rained and rained and rained? And I know we don't love the rain, but we need the rain, and it's a good thing. And I'm not a science guy, so I don't really understand how rain works. I know it comes from up there, right? And somehow it starts down here and gets up there. I don't understand how that works. How many of you took a shower today? How many of you took a shower this week? Let's make it easy. Come on, I need to see more hands right now. All right, good. All right, so if you took a shower, maybe you didn't think too much about how that water got up here so it could fall down on you. But it's kind of like a miracle of modern science. And I don't understand how it works, but I know there's lots of pipes and there's pumps and there's electricity and the water has to get from one place to another. And it's this amazing thing. But listen, whatever we do to get that water from in the ground up to our shower head so it can fall on top of us, God does it without any pipes, without any pumps, without any electricity. It's a miracle. Somehow, God takes the water out of the ground, out of the rivers, out of the lakes, puts it in the clouds, and then drops it back down on us. And it makes our world work. And we could go on and on and on talking about the miracles that God is doing around us. Because Jesus is doing miracles around you all the time. And you need to stop and pay attention. Because when you realize how many miracles God is doing right now around you, you realize, I can have confidence that He knows what He's doing. God's not just doing miracles around you, He's doing miracles in you. God's doing miracles in me. When I look at my life and I know where I was and where I am now, and that I couldn't have got there on my own, I know that God has done a miracle. And I'm looking around at you, and I know some of your stories, and I know that God has done amazing miracles in you. He's taken you from where you were to where you are, and it's something you couldn't have done for yourself. It's a miracle. And sometimes it's good just to take a moment and think about that. Say, if God's done this miracle in me, then can He do a miracle for me? The answer is yes. Because right now, He's doing a miracle for you. Remember, on the same night when Jesus was with His disciples in the upper room, He said to them, I'm going away. I'm going, you can't come with me. But that's okay. I'm going to prepare a place for you. So I can come again and bring you to where I am. That's the promise. And Revelation 21 gives the fulfillment of the promise. When John writes about what that day is going to look like, he says, finally, God will be with us. He will be our God, and we will be His people. The dwelling place of God will be with man. There will be no more tears. He will wipe every tear from our eye. There will be no more sadness, no more death, no more suffering. Behold, I am making all things new. And that is the ultimate miracle. And that's the miracle that's promised to us. You see, right now, God's doing miracles around us. And right now, God's doing miracles in us. But He's got one more really big miracle planned for us. But before we get there, we're kind of in that dark night. Just like the official was, waiting to see if his son was healed. And the way we get through the night is to remind us of what we've already seen. You see, I have confidence while I wait for that big miracle. I have confidence because I know what God can do. I know He's the one behind the rain. He's the one that turns the grapes into wine. He's the one that makes the flowers grow. He's even the one that makes the snow fall, whether you like it or not. I want you to be encouraged. If you're a follower of Jesus, if you're a daughter or son of the King, then Jesus has healed you. And Jesus is healing you. And Jesus is going to bring ultimate healing. You can have confidence while you wait. And if that's not you, if you're not a follower of Jesus, if you're not a child of the King, if you kind of been thinking about this God thing and you're not sure about it, you're not sure you're quite ready to give your life over to Jesus, let me invite you this morning to open yourself to Him and allow Him to start working that miracle in you that He's already worked in so many of us. Jesus' miracles point to something. When you see His miracles, do they inspire belief? Do they inspire confidence? That's why He did them for you. Let's pray. Father, I know that the dark night while we wait looks different for all of us. And I know that for some it's darker and it feels longer. I pray for those this morning that you would encourage them, that you would shine your light of joy into their lives. Pray for all of us while we wait for that final miracle that you promised, that you would give us confidence, that you would give us hope, that you would constantly point our eyes back to your Son, to remember what he's already done for us and what he will continue to do for us. Thank you for your word and for the ability we have to go to it, to be reminded of who Jesus was and what he did for us. Pray that you would be with us this week. Help us to be a light in the darkness for your world. In your name.